Welcome to this presentation of the additional data fields that are available when processing transactions within the SlimCD system. Here's some basic information about our company. Now, these additional data fields are available through a variety of the APIs that you may have already watched in some of our other videos, starting with the direct connection APIs, but they're also available through hosted payment pages, the libraries, and most, if not all, of the APIs that we make available to you. So these data fields can cover credit card processing to qualified transactions so that you get the best possible rates, or for industry specific data you might need. For example, if you're a pharmacy, you might need to send additional data fields to get the healthcare flex spending cards to be approved by Visa and MasterCard. Check processing is a little bit different in that certain processors require additional data elements so they can perform fraud detection and approve transactions, and we'll cover that in a little bit. And gift card supports some additional transaction types, and there's some features available just to gift cards, because gift cards is a closed loop system where it's a specific gift card provider that's holding all the card data. They're the issuer and they're also the acquirer. They're the ones that we send the transactions to for approval. So in credit cards, some of the more important things to be aware of are the invoice number, and we've got a whole slide on the invoice number. I'm going to cover that in a minute here. Level 2 processing is designed for acceptance of business cards and giving you a better rate than you might get if you don't provide this data. This includes a purchase order number, sales tax, a sales tax type. So in the case of level 2, you can either send it as part of the transaction, or you can be prompted for it later. You'll get back an indicator that it's a level 2 capable transaction in the reply, and then you can pop up a dialog box or whatever you want to do in your API to prompt for that additional information. I recommend just sending it on every transaction. If you've got it, we'll use it when we need it. Level 3 is another business-to-business feature where the merchants can get better rates, and that's where you're sending all the line item details for a particular purchase, and I'm going to cover that in another slide as well, so I'm going to leave that for now. There's a lot of industry-specific information you can send. Some of the most important stuff for retail is the card present indicator, the reader present indicator, the type of reader that's present, and that helps Visa and MasterCard know whether the consumer is in front of you or whether you're taking a phone order, and can affect things like whether or not you can accept the CVV2, 3 digits in the back of the card, etc. Gratuity is tip for restaurants and hair salons, etc. The flex spending data I mentioned briefly before, that's the pharmacy specific data for the healthcare cards. Hotel data lets you get the hotel rates. You need a variety of information there, and auto rental data. So if those industries aren't specific to you, you don't have to worry about those things, but I want to let you know they're all available. Let's start with the invoice number. This applies to all the industries. The developers can send a specific unique identifier for each transaction, and we're going to record that inside the SlimCD system, and on our reports it appears as the invoice number. This number will also be passed to Visa and MasterCard, the payment processors, and it may appear in their reports as well. So it is sent to SlimCD in a field name called client transref, which is the client or the merchant's transaction reference number. We do recommend that you pick a value to put in there that's unique to your system, so that you're tying your system to ours. In a shopping cart, it might be the order number. In a point of sale system, it could be a variety of other things that represent the transaction. So things that are uniquely identifying this particular transaction. Now, because it's designed to be unique, we actually use it in our duplicate checking as well. So if SlimCD doesn't get an invoice number supplied, we're going to take the same credit card for the same amount within a specific amount of time, and we're going to consider that a duplicate. However, there are cases where a duplicate is valid. Maybe multiple people from the same company are using the company card to register for a conference, or it's Mother's Day and you're buying flowers for your mother and for your wife. A lot of situations you might be using the same card, signing up for gym membership with a father and a son, or a mother and a daughter, something like that. So in those cases, if the transaction number, the client transref, is unique, even though it's the same card for the same amount, we're going to consider it not a duplicate and allow that transaction to be processed. So it's really useful to put that in your transactions as you send it to them, and I strongly urge you to do that. It also gives you a way, if you're pulling data from us, to reconcile where you're matching our transactions up to yours with a number that came from your systems. So For hotel transactions, you can put the folio number in there, and that's what's supposed to go in there. For auto rental transactions, the rental agreement number has its own field, but if you don't fill in rental agreement number, we'll use what's in the client transref. We do filter it to get rid of certain characters, so we have some special character filtering there, and because of that, in all of the replies, you're actually going to get back a field from a SlimCD reply called invoice no. The invoice no is that invoice number as it's stored in SlimCD, so if you happen to put a comment in there or a merchant types text in there, and some of those characters might not be allowed, what you get back in there is actually what we stored, so that way if you wanted to store that as well, you'd have exactly what ties to our system, and you wouldn't have to worry about what our filtering is because it's returned in that invoice no. Now, level 2 data I talked about a little bit already. It's the purchase order number, sales tax, and the sales tax type, which can be not available. It is sales tax. The number represents sales tax, or it's a tax-exempt merchant. So your merchant services rep can provide you more information on how to achieve the best rates and what data is also needed for success. If you're a mail order telephoner, you might need zip code also to achieve level 2 rates, but that is an incentive to provide that information. And if you do provide it on every transaction, we'll use it when we need to, and we will filter it when we don't need to, but it will always appear in all the reports. So the purchase order actually gives you the PO field, an extra way to put an additional field in the SlimCD system that you can look at, search for, download in reconciliation data if you call our web services download data. So PO is a very useful field as an additional version of the client transref. I think client transref is the key. That's where your real key value goes, but you can put something else in the PO if you needed to. For retail transactions, if you're doing retail, there are a lot of indicators that help determine how we're telling the payment brands, Visa and MasterCard, what hardware is available in that retail environment. Is the card actually present? Is the reader present? Is it a contactless? So card present and reader present indicate if there's a reader present and the card is present. Obviously, a swiped transaction has both reader and card present on. Contactless readers for Apple Pay or other forms of contactless tapping your card. A chip reader present is a chip card reader for EMV. A contactless reader, obviously you can't have a contactless transaction if you don't have a contactless reader. Does the device have a PIN pad or not? And what is the point of sale type? And the three most popular ones that we support are ECR, which is any kind of point of sale system, phone, and tablet. Now, one important thing is that if you do retail transactions and you set card present to yes, you're not supposed to send address verification with zip codes anymore, so, and maybe CVV2 as well. So be careful with that. Check with your merchant services rep what the latest rules on that, because it's changing. So setting card present to no, then you can do some of the card not present features such as address and CVV2, etc. Other popular industries that we support, you have restaurant, we have gratuity, mail order. There's the ship date where you're shipping the product, and e-goods indicator for physical or digital goods. You'll notice that's just specifically to one processor. And if you're selling online music that they download, that would be a digital good. Most of the merchants sell physical goods. Recurring billing and installment indicators. These help us know, for instance, if you're doing a recurring, you set recurring to yes, then CVV2 won't be required by the issuers when you're doing a card not present transaction, because we can't store it, neither can you. So therefore, if it's a recurring transaction, it's assumed you've already checked the CVV2 on the first transaction through the system, and the recurring transactions won't have it. Same for installment count and installment sequence numbers, payment 3 of 5, that type thing. So these are mainly for mail order and e-commerce, but check with your merchant services rep if you need to use them anywhere else. Flex spending is very specific to the pharmacy industry. I'm going to show the slide to show that we cover all these things, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Same with lodging. If you're in the lodging industry, you've seen a lot of this information, but we certainly support all those fields. Rental agreement number and the auto rental data is covered here, and I already talked about how rental agreement number, if it's not there, we'll use client transref. So again, for auto rental folks, they already know a lot about that. Now, I've talked about level 3 before, and that does apply to a lot of industries, so I'm going to spend a little more time on it. So here with level 3, we have the ability to send up to 25 items. So each one of these things, I show them here with parentheses, but it's really just item description followed by the number 1, unit of measure 1, unit price 1, item quantity 1. Then when you're sending the second one, it would be item description 2, unit of measure 2. So you'd send just the number where I have the N there in parentheses. So you want to specify all those things for each line item, and you can have up to 25 of them. So if you're sending us specifically the details for that purchase, you can have all those items in there, and then they need to total up and match to the total for the order. There's some other fields that can be supported by some other processors, and that's the ship from zip, the ship to zip. If you don't give us a ship to zip, we're going to default it to the customer zip. Ship to country, same thing. VAT invoice number, if you're really selling and you have a customer VAT registration, if you're selling in areas that have VATs, then you can provide that. Summary commodity code for the whole order, duty amount and discount amount. Those totals can be sent as well, primarily for specific processors. Other processors may not need that information. Now we have something called Level 3 Express, and this is going to be important for a lot of folks that want to get Level 3 but don't want to do all the work to send the line item details. And how that's done is you create a default product within the SlimCD website. So you'll create a product, pick a category code, and all the commodity codes and all those things, and we recommend you choose generic codes that best match the merchant's industry. So if they're selling auto parts, rather than saying it's lug nuts for your car or windshield wiper blades, we suggest you choose something like generic auto parts and then mark that product as a default product. Whenever our APIs or any of our user interfaces process a transaction, if there's no Level 3 line items provided, then we'll look up the default item and we'll build a Level 3 item that matches that exact transaction. So if you give us Level 3 items, then we'll use them. But if you don't, we'll search for a default product. Based on that default product, build a Level 3 record that matches the total of the amount for the transaction. We'll reverse calculate the sales tax. If you give a sales tax, we'll use what you're telling us. If not, we'll use the tax rate built into the merchant's profile. So let's take a quick look at that. I'm going to log in here to a SlimCD account. Just a test account that I've got. And if we look under invoices, manage products, I have some products here, and we can see whether the products are taxable, etc. Here's a default product. So I've marked this one as the default Level 3 item. If we look at it, we have a product code, we have a commodity code, we have a unit of measure, and you can locate product and commodity codes here or search the web. Marking it the default item tells our system this is what we're going to send through as the description and the unit price and all the rest of the information that's needed, and we'll build that automatically. So that's a great way to get Level 3 rates, is using that. The merchant simply has to set that up within our web interface, and as a developer you don't have anything to do anything special. It'll simply happen on all the transactions. Now, some processors have specific fields that can appear on their processing reports. They're user-defined 1, 2, and 3. You can see the sizes. They don't appear anywhere in SlimCD reports, so those just get passed through the processor. Now we're going to move on to check processing. Check processing within SlimCD can either be paper checks at a point of sale, actually call it a point of service in the check industry, or electronic ACH or check conversion. Check conversion is when you swipe a paper check through a reader, hand the check back to the consumer, and it turns it to an electronic draft. So we support check conversion, we support ACH, which is commonly known as like direct debit, where we're taking money out of someone's checking account, and ACH is really the most popular and growing way to accept checks these days. Signing paper checks and having them verified is diminishing in its volume capacity in the payments world. So when you take a check, there's a few things you can do. One is just to auth or to verify, check for two different verbs for the same thing, two different trans types, and that just does basically a credit check lookup on the credit or the worthiness of the check writer. So based on information they provide, such as their checking account information or maybe their date of birth and driver's license, it looks to see if they're known to write a lot of bad checks or whether they're on a good database where they're known that all their checks clear, and they'll give the merchant some warm and fuzzy feeling by saying, yes, it's good to accept this check. That may or may not come with a guarantee that if the check's returned, the check collection company or the check verification company will make good on the amount of the check. That's all between the check company and the merchant. We don't get involved with that part. We're just performing the authorization. A sale is actually going to take money out of the checking account. So if you're doing a sale on a paper check, we're going to convert it to an electronic check and draft the money, or the check processing companies that we interface will actually do that. And if it's an ACH, the same thing. We're going to format up the direct debit information and pull that money from the consumer's checking account. There are some additional data fields that are required on checks, and this is kind of a sticky wicket in that depending on the check processor you're using, and even within the same check processor, the risk assessment they've done on the type of business that's accepting checks and the type of customers they have, they may change the amount of fields that are required. So it's really tricky when you're coding to Slim CD and you ask, well, what are the fields required for checks? Well, here's all the ones we can support. I can't tell you which ones you're going to need in a particular instance. And let's say that you're in a particular industry and you're setting up many customers in that industry. It may be possible that two customers that look identical have different requirements depending on the deal they signed with the check processor. Maybe one of them's getting a better rate by providing more information. So it's really hard to know for each particular setup what is and isn't required. But I've got a lot of information here on the screen for you. The paper checks, you got to scan the entire line when you're doing the conversion to electronic. For check verification, you can either scan the line or key it in, again depending on what they want from the check processor. And ACH, you're going to type in the routing and account number. And again, I mentioned all the rules such as driver's license, social security number, etc. Gift cards are also a little bit special in that they have some transaction types you can't do on a regular credit card. To activate or deactivate a gift card, which you might do at the point of sale when somebody's buying one. That way you have deactivated cards on the rack, and when somebody picks one up, if they take it, there's no value on it. They have to activate it and preload it with funds to add value to it. So you can add value to them, which is like a credit or a refund, or you can just be adding points or extra value to the card for rewards and things like that. Redeem it is like similar to a sale where you can take things off the card, either take money off the card or points. Balance is to find out what's on the card. And replace, if you've lost a card number or a card number becomes damaged, you can take a new card out of inventory, replace the old one with a new one. So those are some of the special case transaction types for gift cards. Now all of our web services, when you'd use everything the way you do with credit card, but you set card type to either GC or LC for gift card or loyalty card. Other than that, it's the same API. So the card type input to Slim CD would be GC or LC. Otherwise, it's the same as credit cards from an API point of view. So if you got an API with Slim CD that supports credit cards, adding gift card support is the same exact code, you just whether or not you set the card type. EBT is specialty for taking, EBT or WIC, food stamp, that type of stuff. We do support it. I'm not going to go into detail there. It typically requires a PIN pad, so I'm recommending you use our semi-integrated solutions that do all that for you. When you're going to use these additional fields, all the fields I've just covered in all these industries, if you're doing a post-HTTP web service call to us, then you simply add the name value pairs. And I didn't URL encode here, but you can see ampersand check-in date equals, and then you'd URL encode the slashes with the value here. In the process transaction or post XML, you're formatting up an XML document, so your check-in date is surrounded by the tags, and again you would XML encode the data inside, which means replacing ampersands and things like that with the correct HTML-like or XML style encoding for data. And JSON, if you're calling the JSON endpoint directly, check-in date in JSON format, and again you want a JSON encode and escape the proper characters here so you don't have JSON errors with compilation. But just add these fields to the regular document you're already posting, be it name value pairs, an XML document, or a JSON block. In our libraries, we do expose many of the popular fields such as gratuity and things like that, so a lot of that's going to be available. If it's not in the existing properties, then we have a dictionary on each of our libraries called industry specifics, and you simply add items. Here's an example: request.industry specifics of the check-in date would be whatever your variable for the check-in date is, you set that. So you can build this dictionary up with all the industry specifics for hotel or auto rental or flex spending or whatever those things are. Even the line item details for level 3, just put them in industry specifics. If they don't exist as existing properties like industry specifics does, then put them inside industry specifics. Now PHP is an exception to that. We don't have an industry specifics dictionary there. Instead, you have the request objects and source code. Just add them to your definition of your request object and they'll be posted over. in the actual HTTP or XML, they're all flat anyway, so it doesn't matter. Simply extend them as you'd like. So our developers web services are all on our developers website, which I've covered on a number of other videos. I'm not going to get in a lot of details there, but certainly in the APIs you can see a lot of this information I'm talking about how to format up the name value pairs and where to put the information. So that's a very quick overview of a lot of the data fields that are available in the SlimCD web services. In our main website here, if you come to the SlimCD SDKs, you can download the PAWS or the Web SDK on the SDK links, and they've got a lot of the definitions of these fields and the business rules behind them in there. A lot of that didn't quite make it to our website yet, but they're in there if you want them. And of course, there's more sample code here for PAWS and Web for different languages specific to PAWS and Web. Feel free to download that and use that. If you don't find the samples that you already want on the rest of these tabs, there's plenty of tabs there with lots of samples. So if you can find a newer sample with a specific tab for it, like .NET or Android, use that. If not, feel free to look inside the zip files. Again, let the tabs themselves that are at the higher level, if they've got samples, it's newer, use that. But there's maybe some older samples in here for Cold Fusion and Fox Pro and things like that that you may be interested in if that fits your needs. So there's the URLs for the website, and thank you very much for taking a look at the extra data fields within SlimCD and how to get the most out of them.